their way. So generally dismissive avoidant people also in sort of under this what you need to know umbrella, they have learned that their emotions really didn't get them anything, because when they express emotions there was consistent rejection. So they sort of view emotions, at least sort of stored in their nervous system, as weakness. Like their emotions are almost a threat to themselves, and so they can be quite emotionally repressed in this area and sort of detached from their emotions, to varying degrees, but almost to degrees of severity a little bit. And they also see closeness as a threat. Their nervous system responds to too much emotional connection or bonding as being a threat, unless, of course, this is something that is created slowly, consistently, and over time. And that can facilitate change. But too much closeness too soon, this person gets overwhelmed, their nervous system gets overwhelmed, because closeness for them, remember, in some of their earliest subconsciously programmed perceptions, closeness for them meant pain. Closeness for them meant, stress and hurt and all these different things. So they actually are still sort of reliving these patterns. They see reality through that filter of those early patterns, if that makes sense. And again, they keep this assumed perception that everybody's out for their own needs, because that's what they saw, that's the upbringing they had, and they learned to cope by taking care of themselves, more or less, physically and emotionally. Now, this won't be to the degree that they did everything for themselves, but there was enough consistency that tremendously outweighed the consistency of emotional needs and or physical needs being met, that they assume that, okay, everybody's kind of out for themselves. And so they have this sort of tendency to almost want to hoard their resources, because they feel like, I can't go to anybody, I can't rely on anybody, I don't have anybody to fall back on. That's sort of this assumed message that they received. And so they can be protective at first, with money. They can be a bit taking, because it's sort of, they're almost operating a bit from the survival oriented mentality, and at least their nervous system is. So when we judge, selfish and takers and all these different things, understand the roots so that you can communicate from a different space, so that you can move from a different space in this relationship. So those are some really key points you need to know. Now, here's what I found through working with many clients over time and really seeing these patterns and noticing these patterns. And there will be more things to add, but here are some really consistent pieces that you'll see. Generally, the core triggers for a dismissive avoidant person is that they struggle so much with criticism. Shame is really painful. Any criticizing, they take a shame. And the reason is because when this child is a young child developing and their needs aren't being met, they can't look at their caregivers and say, oh, my parents aren't doing a very good job, or, I'm not getting my needs met. Instead, we are wired for attachment, all human beings. And so instead, they can only really assume that there must be something wrong with them, that they're not getting their needs met. And so they usually store this core interpretation or deep wound of something's wrong with me. And the emotion that usually goes with that is shame. And so anything that touches on shame is extremely painful, because it's sort of reigniting a lot of this pain inside. And so criticism, they tend to just shut down and withdraw so quickly, and it really builds walls, and it really erodes the connection when what you say is coming from a space of seeming shaming. And sometimes we won't even, as human beings, mean to seem shaming. Maybe we'll say, hey, you did this to me, and that's not okay, or but really, unless you're saying, hey, I felt this way when this action was taken, and you may not notice, but this is what it makes me feel, and I would really appreciate if you could be a little more careful in this area. Unless we're expressing from our space of vulnerability, which again takes strength to do, and please watch my video on conflict communication, because it'll sort of outline a little bit more of this. But unless we are moving from a space of vulnerability and courage to do so, it naturally, a dismissive avoidant also perceives any form of even discussing core issues can sort of be taken in through their reality filter, as if it's criticism. It's often perceived and taken in as criticism.